Tony Bellew versus David Haye 2. In this video, I'm going to be discussing the key factors of this rematch along with my own prediction. But before that, I want to ask you to do the same and stick your neck on the line, pick a side and make your prediction. To do this, jump down to the comment section below and tell me whether you're picking Tony the Bomber Bellew or David the Haymaker Haye. And remember, please subscribe to my channel for more big fight predictions and discussions. So you know, this fight is happening at the O2 in London and is a rematch following the first battle which happened in March 2017. Now this was scheduled to take place in the back end of 2017 but has been rescheduled due to injury. Now yesterday we saw the press conference for the announcement of the re-announcement of the re-announcement of the announcement that this fight was finally going to take place this year. You know, so it's no better time than to go over the fight. Let's talk about what's going to happen. You know, I like both guys here. I followed them both, and you know, I've supported them both. You know, David Haye's cruiserweight run, going up to that championship, the unification, then his run for the heavyweight title, all very enjoyable. You know, we loved how, you know, he made a name for himself out of the ring, but he's kind of always disappointed us because, you know, most people that, you know, follow David Haye thought he could do so much more. Even in defeat, we thought that he could come back and have some really interesting fights that never really come to fruition. You know, lots of pullouts, lots of missed opportunities. And we've got Tony Bellew, you know, underrated. Some would say criminally underrated and criminally overlooked. You know, against Cleverly in the first fight. You know, I actually picked him to outbox Cleverly. You know, it didn't quite go his way, but you know, it was a close fight. And it's something that no one expected. You know, they thought he was a brawler that was lacking in skills, and his only chance was to knock out Nathan Cleverly. But you know, he put a very good account in a good, exciting fight, and he's gone on to have a stellar career, picking up a world championship. You know, and putting in some great performances. I actually think that this fight, Tony Bellew versus David Haye in the rematch, I think it's going to be a good fight, and I'm actually excited about it. But, you know, we need to think about what's going to happen and what has gone on before, okay? Because this is a rematch. And there are three things that seem to have been taken away from the first fight, okay? The first thing is that Bellew won the fight, okay? That he beat David Haye. The second thing is that Haye underperformed, okay? That, you know, he was poor, okay? And the third thing is that the first fight is a good indicator for the second fight, you know? And you know, in this video, we're going to be discussing those points, okay? So let's get on with it, okay? You know, let's talk about the first fight, you know? But here's the facts, okay? Because we need to talk about what happened, okay? The overriding factor of the first fight and how it came to an end was an injury sustained to David Haye that was not inflicted by Tony Bellew. No one can argue against that, okay? And that is where we go to point one, that Tony Bellew won the fight, that he beat David Haye. When in reality, David Haye lost the fight, okay? So, you know, so let's talk about what actually happened. You know, this is what a lot of people don't do. They don't talk about what actually happened. You know, the first fight starts, Bellew was making Haye miss. And he was making him miss a lot, okay? He even got a cracking right hand in that first round, okay? But Bellew was missing too, okay? There was a lot of punches being missed by both people, but it was more evident that Bellew was making David Haye miss in those early stages. But despite that, I mean, personally, I thought that Haye was in control and it was fairly comfortable. For me, he wins the first 5 rounds fairly comfortably, fairly comprehensively. You know, for particularly for the first 2 or 3 rounds, Bellew's on the back foot. Okay, he's not really instigating anything. As the rounds progressed, you know, he started to put more of a foothold in the ring himself, but still Haye is winning those rounds. Okay, and Tony Bellew has said, and his team has said, this was the game plan, and they talk about what they were planning to do in the second half of the fight, okay? But had the injury not occurred, they would be going into the second half of the fight, behind, and having to really kind of dominate the second half of the fight. And because of the injury, we can guess, but we never know whether Bellew would have been able to execute that game plan. We just don't know, okay? But in terms of a spectacle, when this injury occurred to David Haye, which was a leg injury, for a long period of time he was struggling to stand. It was after this injury that the fight came alive. And for me, it was one of the most exciting fights of 2017, without a doubt. Okay, what's amazing is David Haye, despite the fact that there was that injury, he managed to last another 5 rounds. Okay, I'm sure most people, a lot of guys, wouldn't have been capable. Okay, and of those 5 rounds, I even have the opinion that he won a round. He won one of those rounds after the injury occurred. Okay, so if you forget about knockdowns for the purpose of like playing devil's advocate, for me, at the time that the fight was stopped, I had David Haye that he'd won 6 rounds. Obviously, including the knockdowns, he's still going to be down on my own scorecard. But that's when we go to we start to talk about point 2 that I said that Haye underperformed. So if you think about that, so far he's won 6. End of the fight, he's won 6 out of 11 rounds. Okay, the towel comes in from McGuigan to prevent any unnecessary damage to David Haye, which is fair. But David Haye, he got knocked through the ropes, but let's not forget he got up and he was prepared to keep going. And I think he wanted to, despite what he has kind of maybe said since and whatever. I think he wanted to continue, and he was capable of continued. And it would have been great to see whether he would have lasted the full 12. He would have lost the fight, no doubt about it, because he was struggling, and it's unlikely that he would have lost that round, the 11th, and he most likely would have lost the 12th round, and he would have just been banking on maybe getting that that Hollywood, that dream KO in the last round. But I would have liked to have seen the fight go on. I said that at the time, and I've said it since. I would have liked to have seen that fight happen, that fight go to conclusion, to see what would have happened for the 12 rounds. Because he didn't look like he was taking serious punishment, right? And you know what? A lot of people talk about Haye being the pretty boy. He can't fight, he can't dig down. He's always got an excuse. We've seen these excuses time and time again. And you look at the way that he looked towards the end of that 6th round when he was down again, and he was sitting on the canvas, and you could see there was thoughts going through his mind. Should he just end it there? Cite the injury. Even Bellew said in the press conference yesterday that he did not expect him to keep going after that injury. He didn't know how he was going to react to getting injured. Okay, but he got up, he kept going, and he kept going for 5 rounds when he was struggling to stand. Even I think it was the 8th round, or the end of the 7th round. He almost tripped over himself because his leg just was unable to support his weight. Okay, and in the 8th round, I think there was times when he was holding himself up on the ropes. Okay, but he kept going. And we look at the 7th round, and it's a good example of the fact that of taking the punishment, okay? Because in the 7th round, this was after the round after the injury, and we saw Bellew throw 91 punches, but he only lands 26. You know, he threw the kitchen sink against someone who couldn't stand, and there was no knockdowns, no nothing. It didn't look like he was going to be capable of stopping David Haye. And David Haye, you know, he had this injury. Everyone knew he had his injury. The referee knew he had the injury. You know, it was just, it could have been stopped so easily. But Bellew, he just could not, he couldn't formulate a way to get the referee to stop the fight. Okay. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm swaying towards Haye, you know, in this discussion, or sounding like a fanboy, but we have to go back to point one. And point one is that Bellew won the fight, that he beat David Haye. It's a technicality because David Haye was seriously injured. Okay, he was seriously injured. And, you know, I remember at the time, hearing at the time, so much about how well Bellew performed. It was a career-defining performance, that he bested Haye. But, you know, we have to discuss what happened. Because if we don't, what's the point? You know, the overriding factor in this fight and how it came to an end, as I said at the start, was that an injury sustained David Haye, and it was not inflicted by Tony Bellew. Okay, they're the facts, right? And in fact, even the possibility is that he came into that fight with that injury. Okay, but anyway, you know, Tony Bellew, he did get the stoppage victory, you know, and, you know, it's on the record, and that's great for him. And because of that, he's ended up getting another amazing financial incentive to get the rematch. I mean, it was always going to be the rematch if Tony Bellew won. Don't mistake that. There was always going to be a rematch if Tony Bellew won. So, you know, let's talk about some other things here, you know, some other factors about this fight. David Haye has changed his trainer, okay? No surprise to me, absolutely no surprise. You know, when a coach throws in the towel, they're effectively issuing their own P45. They're saying, I no longer want to train or coach this boxer. I know they're doing it with good intentions. They're doing it with good intentions. They're trying to protect their fighter. But we know that, you know, fighters they're a different animal. You know, there's pride there, and whenever a towel is thrown in, you know, 9 times out of 10, that severs the relationship between the two. And David Haye's moved on, and he's got Ismail Salas. You know, it's a bit of a different direction for him. You know, with Ismail Salas, he's got a reputation of, you know, coaching very skillful fighters that fight to a game plan. And we even saw it in the press conference where, you know, he just said, look, I'm here to talk about boxing, nothing more. And, you know, he didn't really have much to say. You know, he's a boxing man, and that's it. He doesn't want to talk about the antics and all this stuff between the two guys. He just wants to talk about boxing, and then they kind of just left him to it. Okay, but, you know, he's obviously going to be in a different direction. Maybe the calmness of Salas will be a good thing for David Haye, because we've seen in the past very emotionally in on every fight, the promotion, everything. So maybe, you know, the calmness will breed calmness in David Haye. We'll have to wait and see. Now we have to see when we see the final press conference on the week of the fight, the weigh-ins, and whether, you know, more emotion gets charged up between the two, and they really try and promote it to try and get the box office revenue. So, is David Haye fragile? This is a fantastic point, because we've seen David Haye be injured over and over and over again. You know, whether it's foot, toe, arm, bicep, pec. We've seen all these different injuries that have prevented him from excelling in the fights that he either underperformed or lost. And we've seen these things prevent him from actually going through the fight. We've seen him pull out of, you know, multiple fights over the years. So many big fights he's pulled out, and it's been a huge disappointment. We've had a huge disappointment. Whereas we've seen on the other side with Tony Bellew, he's really been prepared to fight anyone that's, you know, been put in front of him. Okay, and he's been a good ambassador on that respect. So, you know, as I said just a few moments ago, for me, I actually think that David Haye, he went into that fight with the injury. Now, it obviously went really sour for him in the fight, but I think he went in with a little bit of an injury. You watch that fight, the way that he's dragging his back leg, it doesn't seem natural. It doesn't seem fluid. As I say, it seems like he's dragging that foot, okay? And that obviously hindered what he was doing in those rounds. And maybe that's, you know, part of the reason why he was missing. He was swinging. He was trying to get that big knockout. But no, that's a discredit to Tony Bellew, because I actually think that Tony Bellew was making him miss in those early rounds. I definitely believe that he was making him miss in those early rounds, okay? But I would say the answer to my own question, is David Haye fragile? I'd say 100%. He's fragile and he's getting worse, you know? So you can only imagine how this... We just have to hope that he can get to the fight to compete, okay? Now, how can Tony Bellew win? For me, I think Tony Bellew can win this fight, even if they are fit, both fit. But he has to do it on the back foot. I think if he comes to fight, now he kind of gives the impression that he's gonna fight and he's prepared to stand and trade and whatever. I think if he does that, he's definitely gonna get knocked out. But if he fights clever, shows the boxing skills that he has, you know, like I said at the start of this, that he's criminally underrated boxing skills, okay? If he shows this, if he moves, if he makes David Haye miss like he was doing in the opening rounds in the first fight, he can but blend that with a bit more offense, a bit more counter, you know, trying to land those big shots. Now, he can win those rounds. He can win more of those rounds, okay? So, no, it is possible, you know. But I was saying, when he's on the front foot, for me, I've never been a fan, okay. And even when you look at the first Haye fight, I think it was like the 8th round when Haye was basically just sitting on the ropes, and Bellew was going for it, and Haye was avoiding almost every single shot. I mean, the land percentage of punches that he landed was so poor in that round, and Haye was just, you know, he was just avoiding them because Bellew was on the front foot. But anyway, next question: does Haye want it? Does he really want it? I mean, he's come out and he said in this press conference that if he doesn't win in style, you know, there really isn't any point in him continuing. You know, he seems to have lost his spark. Both this press conference, the back end of 2017, he didn't seem interested in this. He didn't seem interested in the press conference. He didn't seem motivated. He didn't seem to have that energy that we've come to expect from David Haye in these big fights, okay? And for me, I kind of made a video some time ago, and I said about the first rematch, and I was saying, I think this is just a cash out. I think this is a cash out that, you know, he's not looking at long term. He's seen that the rematch is his best financial fight that he can actually get, and he's decided to take it. You know, he can't compete at heavyweight, I don't believe. He's kind of lost that fear. I mean, heard Eddie Hearn talking some time ago, and I mean, obviously they're trying to discredit David Haye, but you know, he said that some years ago, you know, David Haye really struck fear into people, but now he just doesn't. He just doesn't do this, you know. And for me, I believe this will be the last fight in the career of David Haye, win or lose. The only event, or the only kind of outcome I can see where David Haye doesn't call it a day, is if there is the option for a trilogy with Tony Bellew. And I believe the only way you can see a trilogy with Tony Bellew is if David Haye wins, but he only does just enough to win. So we're talking about a points decision, or maybe a late stoppage, a messy kind of referee stoppage, not a convincing performance, okay? That's the only way I see a third. So what about Tony Bellew? I mean, I actually wouldn't be surprised if he calls it a day as well, win or lose. I mean, I think if he wins, I think we're more likely to see him call it a day. Maybe if he loses, we might see him continue and try and get another big fight. Now, we know that he's got the WBC option. He's got that title where he can pull in as the mandatory whenever he wants. And, you know, I think as long as he is able to be fit and get ready for a fight, he would be a fool not to take that option at some point and, you know, possibly fight the winner of the World Boxing Super Series, you know, maybe later this year or early next year. So, you know, where do I see this fight going? No, I have to go with the person I've gone along with all the time. And that, of course, is going to be no surprise to anyone that's got to this part of this video. And if you have got to this part of the video, let me know in the comment section below that you got to this point. I'd love to know. But, you know, I'm going to be going with David Haye. The biggest question is he fit? Because if he's fit and he's healthy and he's mobile, you know, no one can really put together an argument that Tony Bellew can beat that kind of David Haye. But does that David Haye exist? We mentioned it just a few moments ago that, you know, he isn't really the same fighter. You know, the injuries. You know, he's a much heavier guy, and he might be weighing the same. But you look at his physique now to what it was in, just say that even the Chisora and the Klitschko fight. His physique is different. It's a lot more thicker. You know, it looks a bit more old manish, you know. But, you know, we have to wait and see what version of David Haye comes into the ring. Because if it is the David Haye that we know, then you'd expect him to stop Tony Bellew. If it's not, it's going to be a long night. Tony Bellew has those options, and we discussed them, the tactics that I would adopt for him, the way that I see that Tony Bellew has the option to defeat David Haye. But there we go. That's my prediction. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, you know, jump down to the comment section below and let me know who you see winning. Do you see David Haye winning by knockout? Do you see Tony Bellew winning by knockout? What do you see? How do you see this going? You know, you can only say what you think, and what you think has to go in the comment section below. And remember, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next video for another big fight prediction.